2, 1. Alrighty, great stuff. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this February's QGIS Open Day. Thank you to everyone who's in the Jitsi room with us for this open session, and thank you to the people who have joined in on our live stream. I already see the number flipping up and up. So I'd just like to introduce everybody and just bring everyone into the session. So our session today, well, the first session is going to be about all those little niggles and things that irritate you or could be improved about QGIS, and bring those things in. We have some of the QGIS senseis with us in the room, including Nyall Dawson, Raymond Nijssen, Tim Sutton, Charlie is also here, and there are a whole bunch more people in the room with us, so we will get to that in a moment. But first, we've all decided that we can't ignore what's happening in the world currently. So I'd like to hand over to Nyall, who'd like to say a couple of words about that.
Yeah, I'll try and come up with some words, but really what's on our hearts at the moment is that there are, there's some core members of the QGIS community who are being directly affected by this, in Ukrainian residents, and our heart just goes out to them. So Alex, I don't know if you're listening to this or not, but yeah, I don't even know what to say. Yeah.
We're all lost for words, basically, and yeah, and like Nyall says, our thoughts are with everybody in Ukraine. And we hope everything resolves in a peaceful way. And,
yeah, and please, if there is anything we can do from the situations where we are in the world, reach out and let us know. It seems cheap to say, but we, as much as we can be, we are behind you and we're supporting you. So yeah.
Yeah, and maybe also just to say that we're going to talk about a lot of QGIS nerdy things today, but we're not ignoring what's going on in the world, and we just want to acknowledge that a lot of people are under a lot of stress at the moment, and our hearts and thoughts are with you all.
Yeah, and we definitely don't want to make light of any of that by the discussions or the topics that we're going to focus on today. Definitely not.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate your kind words, and I'm sure everyone in the comments, etc., all of our thoughts and prayers are with you. Anyone who is in the Ukraine or involved in that conflict, we just hope for a swift and peaceful resolution. So to remain and bring in some semblance of normal, we'd like to hop straight into our session, where we'd like to open it up for anyone who has any questions, any things that are niggly or irritating for them about QGIS. We have obviously our great developers, etc., behind us. And I think Raymond has some issues to start us off with.
Yes, I came up with this session 1 or 2 weeks ago when the world was a bit more normal still. So I feel also a bit weird about this nitpicking kind of little thingies that are annoying in QGIS while knowing that some real big things are happening in the world. But yeah, as you said, let's just start. There are some things that I've been using QGIS for many years, and there are some little things that just keep on happening there. And every time when they happen, I think like, why is this still like that? And I wrote a few down, and I also asked a few friends, and they came up with a few ideas as well. One of the things is that, for example, when I want to measure something, I click the ruler icon thing. And then exactly where I want to click and measure my stuff is where that window, which will display the length of my line, displays right exactly on the map. So then every time it happens, the first thing I do is I slide it aside and see my map again, and then I can start clicking. And of course, that's a super small thing, but it's also happening probably thousands of times every day in the world. So altogether, yeah, I wonder, I think most developers think it's not worth even start fixing that because it's so small and it's so easy to solve. Just, slide the thing aside. But it would be so much more convenient if it just appeared somewhere, anywhere else than on the map. So, now, well, that's one of these little things I was thinking about. And another one is when I do a buffer, then the distance of the buffer is already set to 10 meters or 10 degrees or whatever your units are in. And it doesn't make sense because why would it be 10? It's not like, maybe it's an example, there must be a number there or something, but I think most people know. But because there's a 10, I don't look into that thing anymore because it's already saying something. And then I accidentally do a 10-meter buffer where I had to do a 200-meter buffer or whatever. So then I wonder, why is that 10? Because it doesn't make sense that there is a 10. I think someone added that in 2005 or something, and it's still there. And yeah, I wanted to ask other people, because if you work with QGIS, you meet so many of these little things, and I wanted to ask other people, what are they? And I think some of them must be really easy to solve, and some of them might be hard to solve because yeah, you just, when you dive into the code, things happen in another order or something, so you cannot really easily change it. And that's why we have a few developers around as well who can maybe explain why things are not that easy. Yeah.
Yeah, do you want me to field it to start off with, those two? I'll start with the second one actually, because that's an easy one. It would be a 2-second fix, to be honest, to change a default value like that from 10 to effectively like none. And then that would force you to put something in that box that is not the default. I don't think there's a good reason for it. I think nobody's kind of brought it up. No one's kind of logically explained it like you have, and that's the only reason that 2-second fix hasn't been done to date. So there you go. There's the first one.
Okay, so that's an easy one. Yes.
But the ideal value would be, should there be no value there, so that when you quickly look through the window, you're like, oh, there should be a value there? Or should it just be a different default to 10?
It would actually force you to put something in there. So if it defaulted to no value, you would have to put something in there before you could click OK.
No, I just mean, if we're going to change the default value, should we change it to a number or just nothing?
I think
because
it'd be
what
nothing.
number would that be? No one wants. You don't know what.
I think it was someone just added it to make it that you can just like click buffer and then click OK, and it wouldn't throw an error. Whereas we actually need an error for it to be effective, and having a default value is causing more error than preventing it.
I actually don't think there's a ticket about that one. So I mean, that's the first. It's always the first thing to do for something like that. Like a suggestion like that is to go onto the QGIS GitHub and file a feature request or feature request, I guess, and ask the question. There's been many things that have been put onto that onto the GitHub tracker as tickets, where it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, that's a really good question, and there's not really a good reason for it. It's just always been that way, and everybody who's been using QGIS for 5, 6, 10 years is used to it, but there's not actually a compelling reason it has to be that way. And if there's a better default to use, then why not? And that's, I would say this is a prime example of that. To cover your first point about the measure tool, so I think what we're seeing there is measure tool is like one of those kind of fundamental GIS tasks that was implemented in QGIS right back in the early days. So it's like, it's such a fundamental thing in QGIS. It was added right back in, I don't know, I'm guessing here, Tim, version 0.1 probably. It came with a measure tool. And it's really such like baseline functionality that I guess it doesn't drive a lot of excitement, and people just sort of think, okay, well, it's there, you can measure things, and that's sufficient. So I do think it would be worth coming back to that measure tool with a fresh perspective and kind of modern UI eyes and modern UX principles, and just have a look and say, how can we improve this? And I think one of the things would be getting rid of that floating window and making that like a dock or something like that. That's kind of a bit easier to manage and isn't getting in your way like that. I think that definitely does need a bit of a refresh and a bit of a, I guess, a modernization.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good to me. I think the panels are really nice, the dockable ones instead of the floating things that sometimes also can get behind your QGIS screen, and then you don't know what's going on. I don't think the measure tool can get behind it, but it happens with the tables.
There's two different approaches we could use. So one is we could use a dock, like the layer styling dock or the layer tree panel or the browser panel, something like that, where it basically forces it to be a little component in the main window. The other thing we can do is the approach we use for things like the rotate tool, where you get a little pop-up in the top right of your map view, and it sort of sits there embedded in that map view, but you can type in the values there, and that sort of stays like locked on top of that map, so you don't have to manage windows and drag things around. And as soon as you kind of flick off that tool, it vanishes. That would be another potential approach, is to use that style.
That both sounds good. For me, it's a reason I think not making a ticket is that I don't know if I'm the only one who wants it in some other way. Maybe some people are super happy with the 10-meter buffer thing, or
no, there is actually a really old ticket about that one, about the measure tool window being annoying. Yeah. And I'd say the ticket's been there for kind of as long as I've been using QGIS, to be honest. So that's like 9 years. So yeah, it's been there for a while, but I think, again, it just needs someone to kind of spearhead that discussion and say, hey, can we have a rethink about this tool? Actually, the measure tool has a couple of things that I think are really needing to be done there. So one is that whenever you draw the lines in the measure tool, they're always like Cartesian lines in that projection, but the measure tool is actually doing a ellipsoidal measurement, so it's sort of like a great circle measurement, and that the line actually should reflect that it's not a straight line that you're measuring, it's the curve, the one that accounts for the curvature of the Earth. And there's various plugins actually that do that give you a different measure tool that show that, but they need to be pulled into that main measure tool. The other thing that I dislike about the measure tool, I guess, is it's more of a limitation than a bug, but I wish the measure tool worked with the automatic tracing, so you could sort of click on your road and then it followed the road network, instead of you having to go click, click, click and sort of draw this bad approximation of a road. That might come for 3.26. There's things that have been kind of shifted around a little bit that make that possible, so fingers crossed.
Thanks. Should we... I see some questions coming in, Amy. So maybe we
let's jump into the questions. There are a whole bunch. Shall we start at the top?
Yes.
So there's a question that's come in from Toto about profiles. It says, why does the last profile always start, the last profile you used, I'm assuming, always start when QGIS is restarted? For me, it's a little bit of an annoyance. The most used profile should be the one to open.
I think that's a very personal one, but I've been using profiles a lot. I think I have at least 8 profiles in my QGIS, and I would like, if QGIS started, that I pick a profile or something, and maybe if I don't do that within 10 seconds. It will just start, that would maybe make sense for me, because it's not that I want my most used profile, which will always be your oldest one probably, and then it will always stay your oldest one, because every time you open QGIS, it takes the most used, and then it's one time more used. So I'm not sure if that would be the thing. But these things are very, very personal, right? When it's nice. But I always wonder what will happen when I start my new QGIS, because I have 3 QGIS open, and then I open the next one, and I really don't know what profile it will get. So
yeah, there's actually a kind of odd thing here. It's not the last open profile that you get when you start up a new QGIS. It's the profile of the last QGIS window you close down. So it's not even as predictable as like, last time I used mapping. It's whatever window you closed physically last. That catches me a lot.
There was discussion on the mailing forum a while ago, though, I think like a year ago maybe, on how people could open a specific profile with the shortcut. I think, was it you, Raymond, that wrote like a little cute widget that people could have a profile selector or something? I think I did one with Zenity and stuff.
I remember doing that one.
Yeah,
Yes.
so
Yeah,
I mean, that's
ago.
floating around the mailing forums, but it's not built into QGIS. And QGIS at this point only has like a little INR file, like Niall says. The last time you close QGIS, it just writes the current profile to that file. So to get your most popular profile, you would have to be collecting like stats on how open your QGIS window is open for under each specific profile, and it becomes like a whole metadata exercise. So I mean, it could be, it's not as trivial as just, which is my most popular profile. Like I think probably the easiest way to manage it, like for personal preference, would be a setting checkbox that says open this profile like every time QGIS starts, and then you select one
like
from a list.
Default profile.
Like your default profile. Otherwise it becomes this like metadata collection exercise. And at this point, like I cottoned on to the way that QGIS manages it quite quickly, and that works for me. I just know that, like, if I want to use a specific profile by default, I just open and close QGIS with that profile, and then good to go. Actually, one frustration with that is that if I open my QGIS, then open a new profile, it opens another instance of QGIS. So if I close the one in the new profile, then it goes back to my default profile, and I actually have to go back to the previous window, close that, and then close my new profile window to switch to the default profile.
Do you know there's a command line argument you can use to pick a certain profile as well. So if you want to have different shortcuts on your desktop for each profile, that is possible, because you can do a -- profile argument. But yeah,
I think the widgets that we made on the mailing list were pretty much, they go through your user profiles directory, read all the folder names, and then present those as like essentially names you can pick from a list, and then it just passes that as an argument, that profile argument that you're talking about, to the command line, and fires up QGIS with it. So those are very simple widgets that people can make for themselves.
Cool. Let's move on, I think.
Move on to the next one. So we have another question.
Yeah.
I think it's from, the next one down is from Tutorial Geo. They ask, will the data plotly plugin be improved? The data visualization feature is a little bit light in QGIS.
I can fill that one, because I know that the team behind the data plotly plugin have got lots of improvements planned. Specifically, so Matteo is the main developer behind that plugin, and he's got pages of things that he wants to implement there. We are planning a fundraising at some stage to do a bit more investment in that plugin, but there's no kind of concrete date of when that will start yet. So it's on the horizon. Definitely, there is a lot that's coming for that plugin.
Don't you think that's one area? Now, don't you think that charts and visualizations are one area where we should really be trying to get more core functionality in place? Because the data plotly plugins problem, for example, a QGIS server, I don't think it works if you've got reports generated on QGIS server side. And yeah, it's like one of the things that I often run into is people want to produce a chart or something, and then we could go and write a bunch of some custom code again, because either it's difficult to have data plotly as an additional dependency, or you know, and I think there's cute graphing libraries out there in C++, right, that we could be subsuming into the project somehow. Isn't there even a native cute graph library?
Yeah, I mean, that is, I guess that's an option. The thing is, the data plotly plugin is there. It's available today, and it's quite feature rich. It's very feature rich, actually.
Yeah, I love the. I wasn't dissing the plugin at all. I love the plugin. It's just more that, like, there's some cases which you run into where
a plugin isn't suitable.
Yeah.
Alrighty, let's pop on down to the next one. So basically, that functionality is on its way. It's growing.
Yeah, I would say as well, though, that is I mean, the data plotly plugin, it's a third-party plugin. It's not an official QGIS plugin, but it's a community plugin, and there is many people who are contributing to that plugin as well. So there's nothing stopping anybody really getting involved. If you've got a bit of Python skills, you can jump right in and start contributing.
Brilliant stuff. Alrighty, so Azteca P asks, I have a problem when I try to rectify raster. It's hard to know where the cursor is in the X and Y coordinate. For example, from like the frame of the map, I want to rectify. It's better if we have X and Y axis tracking.
I'm not all sure what this means, because the X and Y coordinates of the coordinate system you're in, they are displayed in the status bar below the map. But this is maybe the X and Y in cells or something. Like in the raster.
I don't fully understand that question either, but I would say that a lot has been fixed and improved in the georeferencer for 3.24, and those changes were pushed back to 3.22 as well. So if you get the very latest release, as in like yesterday's release, last week's release, have a play with that and see if your issue is fixed. Fingers crossed, what you're describing is already resolved.
Cool. Let's pop on to the next one. So that Mika, though, says, I always wonder why there are no data-defined override options for draw effects in the layer symbology.
Okay, that means that there's the shadow and the glow, these things. They probably don't have that.
Because nobody implemented it yet, I think is probably the answer.
It's 100% the answer. Draw effects kind of slightly predated the time when everything was data defined in QGIS, and it's solely a matter of the fact that nobody has come and implemented it. There's nothing technical. It's actually not even that big a job to do. It's I guess it's one of those questions where it takes somebody to push it, either a developer to need it for their map that they're working on right now, or a user to sort of put up their hand and say, hey, I'd like to fund this. I really need it. Can somebody give me a quote, and can I see it happen? Nothing technical stopping it. Should be done. Would be great.
Can you maybe explain? Imagine I have some money and I want that. What should I do? Where should I go? Where should I look for people who can help me and I can pay to add something to QGIS?
Hey, Tim, do you want to field that one? I feel like I've been doing a lot of talking.
Yeah, so if you go to the QGIS homepage and you just type in commercial, I think, you see, if you go to QGIS.org, that's normally where I send people. So there's, if you just in the search box at the top, you just put commercial. I'm just doing it quickly now to make sure I'm actually using the right word. You'll find the first hit on the search results says commercial support. And there you'll find a long list. How long is the list? I mean, maybe 30, 40, 50, I don't know, people or companies in there that provide commercial support around QGIS. So if you don't know anybody in the community and you just like want to start from scratch, you could scan through that and look for somebody maybe that's local to you, that speaks the same language, or that there's a company name that you recognize and trust, and approach one of them and say to them, this is what I'd like to add to the code base. Or if you're already a little bit involved in the community, the mailing list, and you've seen people like Nyall or Lutra or OpenGIS or any number of the other developers that are doing things, it's always good to approach somebody that's working in the area that you want the changes, I think, because they're going to be like the most familiar with that bit of code, most efficient, and probably have the least resistance in getting their changes merged into QGIS. So yeah, and then you make a contract with them and they build it. One of the things that we try to emphasize when you do make contracts with developers is that you should include in the contract scope for testing, like writing tests, for documentation, for extended support, and for PR reviews, because these things are often not thought of by the customer, and then you can run into difficulties. For example, you paid for a new feature to be added to QGIS, and 6 months later something breaks, and you want somebody to fix it. They're out of their contract, and there needs to be some kind of sustained or maintenance approach to whatever features that you fund. And it'd be great if you take the responsibility for that as well, instead of just dumping a feature and running. Yep.
Alrighty, great stuff.
Let's move on.
Yeah, let's do it. I see. Thanks, Giovanni, for quick shooting those questions in the live chat. So I'm actually going to move on to a question from, is it Michael, who's in the group with us in the Jitsi room? Does your microphone work? Then you can ask them.
Yeah, I mean, I have two things that I wrote down. Basically, like in any programming idea, like if you have automatically pairing brackets or parentheses, like if I type the left one, I get the right one. If I do it when I have marked text, then it encloses the text that I've marked. And I don't have that in like the query editor in QGIS. I don't know if it's something I can turn on or. But right now it sort of replaces the marked text, and that's annoying. And the second one is
question. I couldn't hear very clearly what you were asking. I don't know if everyone else could hear.
It's in the chat as well, Tim.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so the first question was that Michael is missing automatically pairing brackets / parentheses. For example, sorry, there's a massive storm outside. In the query editor, say you start a bracket, but there's no automatic enclosing of that text. So kind of like in the program IDE.
Right, okay.
Is there some way to turn that on? Is that some functionality that QGIS doesn't have?
Don't think we have it yet, eh?
I'm not sure. Because I personally hate that option. But I know that if you go into the code editor settings in QGIS, there is something about insert matching parentheses or matching quotes. And I've never had a play because, again, I personally hate that setting. So maybe it's there.
Is there one to remove all the excess inserted white space?
Yeah.
And then the second question was, I think that you can't use Windows Grid for resizing and placing windows. If you want to move a table to second monitor or make it cover half the screen. Ooh, this irritates me too. I've suddenly understood your question. Yes. Why can't you snap QGIS to the side of the screen?
But isn't that your window manager that determines that? Rather?
That's a window
works for me.
specific. Yeah, so it's a window specific thing where you like drag things to the top and it goes full screen, where you like lock something to half the screen. I think it's Windows and left or right on the arrow keys, and then you can like snap your active window to like some side of the screen. And if that is not working, it might be a bug in QGIS.
Yeah, I found a workaround for that with like NVIDIA. I can use like the graphics software has their own sort of feature for doing that, which seems to work. I mean, it works for the main window in QGIS, but not for like tables and I have to
Does it
manually
work
do it
for
with
the
mouse
layout?
and-
The layout designer? Did you get that? Sorry, does it work for the layout window as well, or is it only attribute table windows that it's not working for?
Funnily enough, I can snap my attribute tables. It's just the actual layout with the map canvas, etc., that I can't snap. That's my own personal experience of it.
Huh, that's sort of the opposite of mine. That's weird.
I blame Windows.
Yeah.
not your Windows, but
Blame
but it
Windows.
might be a cute upstream issue as well. I mean, I don't know if there's issues outstanding for these things. I suppose that's the way to track them.
Well, actually, so just to clarify a little bit there, the QGIS project uses some of the funds that we get pledged to QGIS.org, and we contract Qt developers to fix things that directly affect QGIS users, right? So sorry, that was a big massive sentence, but there's been basically upstream bugs in libraries that QGIS relies on that have affected us directly, and in recent years we take a part of that QGIS.org bug fixing money and say, okay, well, we'll push this across to those upstream libraries and get things fixed there if they're bad fixes that we'd really like to see. So this to me sounds like potentially something like that. But the first thing to do would be to file a ticket on the QGIS GitHub issue tracker and then let someone kind of find out if that is an upstream issue, and then we can potentially roll it up into one of those contracts where we get things fixed upstream.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, hi, Admire. I see Admire in the live chats. Hi there. He asks, why is QGIS server not able to generate reports?
As opposed to layouts, I guess he's asking. As opposed to layouts, I guess he's asking, yeah. That's probably one for Niall, since you wrote the report, Niall. But I guess well, maybe try to answer it and you tell me if I'm right. But the print map request in QGIS is a proprietary extension. It's not part of the spec, right? And I think Marco Hugentobler wrote the original support for printing your layouts, and I think just nobody ever funded adding the reports module in the same way. How's that for an answer, Niall?
Yeah, 100% spot on. So again, there's kind of two ways things that will get implemented. A feature request like that will get implemented in QGIS. So one is that one of those QGIS core developers or the commercial companies behind it will have a pressing need to use that functionality, and then they'll implement it themselves. Or the other is that an end user will basically ask somebody else to do that for them, or do the code themselves, contribute the code themselves. And in this case, there's no reason why reporting shouldn't be exposed for QGIS server. It's just that those kind of 3 or 4 or 5 ways that things actually happen in QGIS haven't happened yet for that feature request.
I think the same applies to. Sorry, go for it.
This is also kind of a bigger piece of work, right? It's like a huge thing that is not yet in QGIS, and I would like to focus on the little annoyances. The button is in the wrong spot, or that things go wrong. This is just a missing piece of features, I think. So.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing about the other question that was asked about why certain GitHub issues hadn't been addressed. And basically, I think Niall's explained this a bunch of times in community platforms. Like, you can create an issue, but it doesn't necessarily with open source mean that someone's just going to perform that function for you. You've got to either use social credit or push it forward yourself with your own energy or funding, or pay someone else to do it or ask them to do it. The functionality won't just route itself, and things like extending the export to Postgres SQL algorithm. I mean, most of us that use QGIS will be able to just extend or use the existing algorithm for exporting to Postgres from GUDAL or something like that to like append data or something. So like, you know, you need to make a plan to get those things happening.
The thing, I mean, the thing again to just emphasize is that there's a million things to do in a piece of software like QGIS, and there's 10, 20, 30 people that are actively adding things in there. So they're just working according to whatever floats their boat or somebody's paying them to do. And the rest of the things are, oh yeah, I'd also like to have that, but I'll wait for somebody else to do it because I don't have the time.
Yeah, just to kind of extend on that as well, it can kind of come across as a negative way of spinning it, of like, well, if you want to see something happen, you've got to pay for it or you've got to do it yourself. I don't really see it that way. Like, to me, this is one of the big attractions of open source software, is that anybody listening to this stream or using the software has got the power to actually implement stuff in the software. So if they don't have, if they don't have that ability to code themselves, they can contract it out to somebody else. If they don't have the funds, they can try and, I guess, be the spearhead for a campaign to gather other people and gather momentum for an interested group of parties to sort of find the funding for that. But the kind of big attraction for this model is that it's not something where you ask your vendor to fix something and then they're like, well, that's not on our roadmap. You're the only one who's affected by this or who wants to see this improvement. And maybe in 10 years' time, you'll see it, maybe not. Tough luck. With QGIS, basically every single person has the power or has some way of influencing the project to see the change that they want to see happen in that software. So it's a good thing.
Yeah. I always tell people, like, try even having a conversation with an Esri developer. Could you even find one or find out how to talk to them or what have you, or try to actually find a bug tracker where you can go and report, like, or, an issue or the pull request queue that you can go and add something that's just like we're living in.
They have idea websites where you post ideas and then people upvote it like Reddit, and then the development team then takes that and ignores it.
Okay, systematically in a very bureaucratic way.
Alrighty, that's great. So hopefully, Axel B, I know those are most of your questions that our lovely panel of gentlemen here were able to answer those for you. I'm going to quickly hop on to another one. Erin Grossman asks, is there intention to embed figures in the process help windows?
That would be nice. You mean little diagrams explaining what they're doing, I guess.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Nobody's floated the idea.
Yeah.
Even little GIFs, that would be cool.
Yeah, it is a little bit of a I guess, it's a bit of a sore point, is the fact that for all those processing tools, the documentation is split in two parts. So you have the help that sits on the right-hand side of the window, but then if you click the help button down the bottom, you get taken to the QGIS website documentation page, and the documentation there actually goes into a lot more detail, and it does have a lot of those pictures and a lot of the kind of visual explanations. And I think a lot of people don't realize that there's actually a lot more help that's available for all those tools. It would be a nice thing at some stage to smash those two together and have it so that you see the full content directly in that window.
Awesome stuff. I don't know if I've missed any of the questions in the live chat, Charlie. I know you're keeping an eye on that.
Yeah,
thanks
I think
to Peter and Giovanni for answering Shane. That was great.
The community is helping out there. So
yeah,
I think we've covered all those bases. I don't know, Raymond, do you have any more paper cuts? That people
yes, there's one I think you missed, which is from Geo Guru, who was also a moment in this Jitsi meeting. And he asked, and there's one that I found as well. When you make a model, then sometimes QGIS creates invalid polygons because the algorithm does. And then what I would like is like a checkbox that says like every step you clean the model, and because now I put all these make valid blocks between every step to make sure that it will still run. And it would be so nice to somehow force QGIS to fix it. And I wouldn't mind waiting for a longer time, because of course it will take time to every time do this validation check. But I think that is what he means, and at least that's what I understand of it.
That's my number
Would it
one
be possible,
issue.
or is there a reason that it's not?
There's a really good reason. At least I think it's a really good reason. And that is that there's this kind of view that the make valid or the fixed geometries tool is a magic tool that fixes things perfectly. That's not the case. Like, it actually, if you carefully compare the inputs and the outputs of those tools with invalid geometries, you don't always get the answer that you the result that you expect. Like, you kind of visually picture in your head, you can see that polygon and you could draw it easily, but that tool won't always give you that thing that you expect. So it's a little bit of one of those potential traps, I guess, if people just think that trust the tool is giving them the correct output without actually realizing what it's doing. You could get any kind of results from your analysis, and that's why making valid is like an opt-in step. The other things is that make the fixed geometries, make valid, whatever you want to call it, all those routines, they have certain things that they will lose. Like, they'll lose the any M values that your geometry has. They get discarded as part of that process. Any curved geometries get discarded and get turned into segmentized shapes. So it's definitely not a lossless process, even for valid geometries. It can get rid of stuff that you want to keep. And that's why at the moment it's definitely a opt-in, do your own research, make sure that what that tool is doing is okay for your workflow and isn't breaking stuff that shouldn't be broken.
I think there's been discussion on this in the mailing list as well already. I think the challenge is, especially for new users, that things just break instead of running with data loss. But it is a massive issue that if you're not aware that your data is being lost, that you need to be aware of it.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to this sort of issue that's been discussed at length by multiple times in the past about if spatial should be special and require certain knowledge going into it and understanding of what those tools do, or should it just be a tool that you can use out of the box, and if you've got no training, it doesn't matter, the tool makes those assumptions for you and gives you reasonable results. It's a pretty deep philosophical question, I guess, and my personal view is I tend to veer towards that thing of people need to understand all these assumptions that's going into the routines that their data is going through, and it's up to them to make the call of if that's acceptable or not for the particular use case that they're putting that tool through. I'm possibly a bit hardline on my view about that, but I don't know. I'd kind of rather somebody can't use a tool because they don't understand it than somebody uses a tool, gets bad results, and then something bad happens as a result of those bad results, like they build a road in the wrong place or something.
Yeah, I get it. I can
It's
understand.
mildly irritating for us, but it keeps it more like your product's better because actually what you're making isn't losing data, etc. Well,
the thing is that the software is never going to know all the requirements of the task that you put it through. You can sort of look at the software and you can be like, okay, yeah, well, for my piece of analysis, plus or minus 30 meters, whatever, that's fine, don't care. But that's like a judgment call that the analyst who's using that tool is making, and I think really it's the software's responsibility to inform the user as much as possible about things that may impact that choice, but ultimately it's their choice to of whether or not it's appropriate for their piece of work that they're doing. I mean, like tools that sort of shift data by 10 centimeters, for a lot of people, who cares? But for some industries, that's millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of wasted money or potentially lives lost. It's really hard for the software to take a stance either way there.
Alrighty, because this question's actually got a lot of comments going on in the chat. So I'm going to start with Tom. I want to say Chadwin. Sorry if I'm butchering your name.
I think it's a rabbit hole. If I'm honest.
Yeah, it is a bit of a rabbit hole here.
Probably moving on is probably a better plan.
Alrighty. Bit of a rabbit hole. I think this one maybe we can take to the Telegram channel and talk more about. But there is a really interesting question from Herman Fernandez. He says, hello, I'd like to know if there is a simple way to mirror your layer symbology in a data plotly graph or any other graph feature.
Sounds again like that's a plugin thing, right? It's not a...
Yeah, maybe you should just remind people in the channel the topic for the session is like, what can we fix in 5 minutes or less in QGIS native?
QGIS.
Yeah.
I might have a very easy one, and it's annoying when you teach QGIS and you tell people to save the project. You get this save box. They type a name for the project, and then QGIS tries to save the project in the binary installation directory of QGIS and not in your My Documents, whatever place on your computer. And then you get an error, and they don't know why, and it should be easy, I think.
Yeah, this is something that was a big problem in QGIS going back, I'm going to say 5 years ago, pick a number. And Nathan Woodrow actually spent a lot of time. So Nathan, core QGIS developer, fellow Australian, spent a lot of time going through all these kind of parts of QGIS that let you save stuff and making sure that they defaulted to reasonable locations. If you're still seeing this anywhere in QGIS, you need to file a bug report, because it's an easy fix, but it takes somebody to actually point out that it needs fixing.
I think
point out exactly where as well. It's not enough to just say, when I go to save my file, it's missing. You need to say, like, when I go to save my file and I'm saving a layer style from the right-click menu or something like that, give those exact steps to reproduce.
I think that's a really important takeaway from this meeting. It's fantastic to have these kind of things where we can interact. But if you notice that there's something odd, make a bug report. Definitely go through and check that something hasn't been already made, check that nothing's being worked on, etc. But if you find something somewhere and you're the person that's irritating, go and make a bug report, bring attention to that issue, and then obviously a fix can be made. Talking like this is great, but I think, to live in common memory, these things need to obviously be written down or taken down. So definitely lodge an issue there.
I have an issue with the interface sometimes, especially if remoting into like a workstation with a larger screen using like a laptop with a smaller screen. Certain windows, like the style manager kind of panel, like not the properties window so much, but the panel especially, but sometimes the property window too. Like things get squashed up, or like you can't see certain aspects or scroll all the way down to the bottom of the screen, or like a properties window like extends beyond like the screen past the taskbar and certain things like that. But there's a couple places it pops up, especially when like remoting into like I say a larger screen workstation.
Yeah, I recognize it. It's I think Richard came up yesterday with one about the plugin manager that also has in the last step, it has the OK button, which is just below the bottom of the dialog. So you have to scroll down to find the OK button or something. So there are a few of those. But I think it's hard because you don't know the screen size, and sometimes laptops can be have small screens. And also maybe it was designed for in a time that we had still 600 to 800 pixel screens or something, and should work for those as well. So, yeah.
Alrighty, I'm going to squeeze in one very last question before we jump into party mode in our next session. So let me just see here. So Kadir asks, will it be possible to select features on a 3D map as it is in Cesium.js?
I think that's a feature request, like I said in the comments. Yeah.
You can identify them. Didn't they add a patch to identify them? But I don't think you can select them yet. That's the kind of thing. Go and ask Lutra. They're the guys that build the 3D stuff, to add it, or pay them to add it, or tell them your wish, and maybe they'll feel kind and add it for you. But I don't think there's any option to do that at the moment.
Definitely looking.
I have one query for Niall, maybe before we close, which is on bundling of fonts. So like fonts is actually, it's not like a small paper cut thing. It's actually a pain. Like modern websites these days, normally like the best practice would be define your font, from your own CDN, then use like fallbacks, which go through like a web font and then to the system fonts. So how does QGIS manage fonts, and is it not feasible to like be able to bundle a set of default fonts into QGIS that are available across all platforms?
I guess it's feasible. It's kind of more of a packaging, like installation question, and licensing. I guess you'd have to find fonts that are licensed in such a way that we could just bundle them in there. I think it's a discussion worth having. There is a system in QGIS for doing like a CSS style kind of preference list of fonts for things. So you can say like Arial, if Arial's not installed, whatever, Calibri. It has that capacity, but I get what you're saying. Like if there was a bunch of fonts you knew was always available, then that would kind of make it a bit easier to pick if you want a cross-platform safe choice.
And have like QGIS server render, no matter, like if you take a project and you stick it on any machine, it renders the same. That's kind of the challenge I see with it.
Yeah.
And also like encodings.
So I would say, Charlie, that's the sort of thing that just takes somebody to spearhead that project, to basically say, like I want to see this happen. I'm going to do the research, find some good looking fonts that are licensed appropriately that we would be okay to bundle, and then do that kind of legwork of putting together a bunch of short list, getting some feedback, and then I guess having some discussions with the people who actually make the QGIS installers and the packages, and making sure that they get bundled in there. It's actually a fantastic project, I would say, for somebody who wants to contribute to QGIS but doesn't have coding background, because it doesn't need any development. It's a research project.
Awesome.
Does that answer your question, Charlie? Or was that...
Yeah, I'm clapping behind the scenes.
Alrighty. Well, it is my side of the world, 2:00, which brings to the end our hour's worth of little issues that you have. I really want to thank everyone for being so involved. All the questions in the live chat, the people who are in the Jitsi room. Thank you to everyone who's answering the questions in the live chat as well. I think, as a community, we can solve all these problems and people have ideas. And I think that, going forward, if people bring in their ideas and bring in their issues, etc., we will end up with a better community product at least. So I'd like to encourage you to join our next session. It's basically the same people, just in another room, just in case anyone else is joining us for another room. And our next session is going to be a bit of a roulette party for the newest release candidate. And we would love to see you all there. So thank you everyone for joining us for this session, and I will see you in a few minutes. Thank you, gentlemen, for being our panel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the great questions, everyone.
Cool,
Thanks,
thanks. Cheers.
everybody.